question that I really get, and we want to basically also work around that sense of how to deal with insults. Like, for example, most people take this into account. They're like, Arslan, you're saying to respect other person's model of the world. Well, what if they are insulting in nature? What do we do with people who insult? How do we deal with them? How do we handle that? Well, that's pretty much easy. There's a very big difference between, people who are insulting you and people who are genuinely sharing their opinion about, certain model of the world that they have. And these are two completely different factors. Thank you for tuning in at this time. So insults are disrespecting someone. Now, why do people insult? So if somebody has a toxic person, in their surrounding, and most, my audience asks me, Arslan, how can we work around people who are insultive, and how do we, get away with that, sense of area? Well, before you do so, let's first understand what's the dynamics of why do people insult us. You see, we're going towards understanding the other side of the equation. That will help us to shape more concrete sense of answers. So why people insult? Well, number one thing is it could be basically sense of insecurity. People insult you sometimes because they have their sense of insecurities. They don't feel good about maybe themselves. They have a high sense of low self-esteem for themselves, and maybe they're feeling so vulnerable that they're taking their cry for help and they're shifting it on to you. So it may come from a position of insecurity, and that's why they're being insultive in that sense. Now, if you understand that, then you could really help them where it's really required, and that's to help them feel a little bit more significant. They're not really voicing it out to technically insult you. They just may have no strategy to express their cry for help. The other area from where the insult, emerges is basically something that we call jealousy. Has anybody ever heard about jealousy? So most people are insultive in their, sense because they're, jealous. And what is now sense of jealousy? Well, sometimes some people may, envy you, or they may envy their surrounding environment. And that also happens because of the American dream concept. When people watch Netflix, they kind of like see, how every teenage girl has a boyfriend, how everybody has a super luxurious car. And when they envy that a lot and they form that sense of jealousy, so sometimes when they see you also doing more than them in their life, they may be insulted. Now, don't get them wrong. So sometimes maybe insult is not out of, their sense of wanting to hurt your feelings, but it's basically they're hurt themselves and they may be feeling jealous at that, given point. Take it from your own perspective. Have we also, have been envious of something, and we've been jealous of somebody, and we may have said or done something out of mistake, or out of, let's say ignorance of, how to basically communicate our feelings to someone. So don't worry about that. Sometimes insults are, leading or coming from the ground of jealousy. And sometimes it just only comes from lack of awareness or understanding. Most of our clients, may just not know, or they may have not understood you. They lack sense of awareness, how to deal with that situation. And they may have just, said what they said. So that's how it goes. Here's a good example for you. So I have my salon, and I go there and I get, sometimes I get my manicure, pedicure done. And all of a sudden there was, a very religious couple. They brought their son over and they said, well, why don't you get your manicure done? And so there was a female who was attending to his, manicure and pedicure. And the child somewhat responded. He says, isn't this wrong? Kya aap galat nahi kar rahe? And the girl felt so insulted at that moment. I mean, imagine this. I mean, if somebody was doing that as a profession and they were told like this, how much guilty would they really feel? But understanding also from the perspective that that child didn't really understand the dynamics at that point. He saw a religious, fashion that basically was existing in his home, which, in first place, he shouldn't have even been there. The parents shouldn't have brought him in the wrong environment. But it was basically because of lack of awareness or lack of understanding. Since I was just there, I just jumped in and I moderated it so that neither the child feels bad, they understand a little bit more, they get more sense of awareness, and the female who was attending to that child also didn't feel insulted or disrespectful. And I converted it into a situation where it was just a win-win for all of us that were sitting over there, bringing out the awkward and making it to more sense of positive. But you should know why people may seem insulted. Mostly they're not insulting, They just may not have sense of awareness or understanding. Think about that, put to the comments, about if you have ever been in situations like that. And I would be really happy to respond and reply to all of them. Sometimes people also insult you, and why they insult is because they may love you too much. Holy crap. I mean, imagine that. Would some people love you too much? Isn't that, like a dichotomy? Like, for example, they're so fond of you, they may, just basically go into the sense of like teasing you. It's basically something that we call playful teasing. Some people do that because they love you just too much. And that's also very important for you all to understand how to basically, not to react on them, but rather to respond and understand their position of where that insult is really coming from. Maybe it's not an insult, maybe it's just that they love you too much. And they was like, one of the common ones that I get from my clients was, "Usne mujhe fala ne mujhe mota bol diya." Like, they called me fat, they called me ugly. They say, "Yeah, I've got these wrinkles on my eyes." Well, they really weren't really disrespecting you or insulting you. Maybe they just have a lot of love and passion for you. They just went overboard with giving you too much of feedback. So if you understand that from the other person's perspective, that's really, really useful. The fifth reason why people may seem to be insulting is because they hold on to expectations. Whew, I need to take a breath on that one. Expectations. When we communicate with individuals, if you build a library or a data bank of expectations from the other person, you're gonna feel bad, right? I'm not saying one shouldn't have expectations. One should set up some realistic expectations. One should really see if those expectations are meetable on a mutual sense. How would the other person know what you expect from them? How would you know what other person is expecting from you? So just creating a pyramid of expectations without having communicated them can also basically land you feeling as if the other person has insulted you, right? So have that clear sense of setting those expectations, and that will enable you to work around much more intelligently. And what may seem like an insult may not be an insult, and maybe just, somebody wanting to express their sense of expectations, which they're not able to do so. So we're looking at all those why-based reasons. Number 6, that could be ego. Now, some insults come from the ground rules of ego. Some people may go into a sense of their ego, or they want to defend their position or disposition, and at that time their ego may come in between. It's not conscious, it's very unconscious, and sometimes I just want to respect those people and their model of the world. I'm going to take a little bit religious example so that you guys understand this a little bit much more better. For example, Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, or Muhammad, peace be upon him, when he was going towards dawah, which is inviting the call for coming towards Islam, he wouldn't go like, this is halal, this is haram, this is right, this is wrong, this is right, this is wrong. He would first come into terms of commonality. If you really understand the structure of call for, to a certain religion, you first find out and figure out the commonalities. And that's really amazing. But most of the people nowadays, and not most, but some, only few, that puts up a bad impression on the entire industry, which shouldn't be the case. But some people, if you've seen, they go and they argue. And what are the arguments around? You're doing this, this is there, you're gonna go to hell, you're gonna rot in hell. If you don't convert to Islam, you're gonna rot in, because that's where their ego has come in between. Now, then when you understand when someone's ego or pride has come into play, you might want to just listen to them and stop responding or reacting to it. So at least don't react to it, and just maybe respond and say, thank you for sharing your concern. I've understood you, and I'll go and maybe think more. Thank you for sharing that. And that diffuses them, and that basically also gets them to be at more cause, and so that they can also be mindful of where they've, where their ego came in between the sense of what they were trying to communicate to you. That's, why people insult at times. And maybe it's not a real sense of insult, it's just they don't have a strategy for it. And when you get insulted, what happens to you as an individual? So most of the things that we could do is we could cry, we could run, we could basically insult them back, we could basically feel hurt, and we may basically fight with them, or we may react. So those are not the areas that we would want to do. So even should anybody does insult you, what are the cool ways to bringing yourself at peace and helping and enabling you to set that respect for other person's model of the world? Number 1, stay calm. Easy, stay calm. The more calm you are, the insults basically bounce right back from you. It's like a bulletproof vest that you wear. So staying calm is the number 1 thing. Take a pause, breathe. Okay, fine. Somebody said this. somebody said this. How does that relate to me? How's that important for me? Take a pause, and that's going to give you a much more leverage in terms of helping you to counteract that, how to respond back to that sense of insult. Express your feelings. If you really feel, you were insulted, express it. Say, thank you so much for sharing. I felt bad when you specifically said this statement. This goes against my culture, my caste, my creed, my social dynamics, anything that happens, you communicate it, right? Because maybe for most of the times they just don't know what you really require, and you may have never even communicated to them, so they'll just basically go on an assumption. Let them not go on assumption. Let them know you found that to be very insulting, and that's a good way to basically respond and not react and not take it personally to yourself. Also, what you could do is just ignore. Sometimes, you would just go like, thank you. Yeah, sure. So give them a smile, ignore it. And that's also one way to diffuse the sense of insult from getting to you. It's like a bulletproof jacket that you again have. Use humor. Sometimes I just laugh it out. I mean, I don't have to respond to everyone. Trust me. I mean, like, there are many people who are disrespectful, but above the number of people who are disrespectful, there are billions out there that are respectful. So I would want to basically just laugh it off and go to people who empower me rather than people who are insultive in their, dialogue. So that's how I do it. This is a beautiful way that I could build my community, how I could serve you guys, and how I could bring topics that are more meaningful for you to create the empowerment you need. Take care. Arslan Larik signing off.